After having spent hours reading so many truly terrifying tales on this forum, I finally decided that it wouldn't hurt to share my own and that maybe it could help others stay out of similar situations. This happened to me a very long time ago, and it still haunts me to this day, and it is the reason I vowed to never get into a car with a stranger ever again. I won't even get in an Uber because of the possibility of something like this happening again, and I am way beyond college age now. At the time, I was a deeply broke college student. I had made a very dumb mistake of going home to my very unsupportive parents for the holidays that year, and that was a mistake that I will never live down because of all of this. It's not really relevant to the story, but I am not the person that my father wanted me to be. I live a lifestyle that he abhors, and he was very clear that because I'm different, he no longer loved me and that, to him, I was dead. Then, that year, I thought I would go ahead and get a bus to make the long trip out to them to surprise them for Christmas, and that lasted about a day. My father refused to talk to me, and the only time he did say anything to me was to tell me that he wished I would keel over so that he never had to see my face again. Of course, my mother was never willing to go against his wishes, so she just sat there and let him say it. Sorry, this was a bit of a tangent, but it does show that my home life was tumultuous, to say the least. Long story short, after that first night, my father told me to get out, so I did. I grabbed my bag and I walked out to the front door. The only problem with that was that I didn't have a lot of money, and I now needed to get all the way back to my apartment, which, if I had to walk, was going to be a very, very long walk. Add that onto the fact that this was December and it was snowing, and it was more likely that I would end up dead on the side of the road about a quarter of the way there. So I did the next best thing. I decided I would trust some random stranger to get me at least part of the way there, or at least somewhere that I could afford to take a bus to get closer and then repeat the cycle. After about an hour of walking and waving down cars as they passed, an older, rusted pickup truck actually slowed down and pulled over to the side of the road. I was a little hesitant, but the cold wind was absolutely making me less susceptible to red flags. When I got to the window, it was a middle-aged looking man with a scruffy beard, older and slightly tattered clothes, including the generic lumberjack plaid overshirt. He looked like someone that you would expect to drive an old and slightly rusted out pickup truck in the middle of December in the Midwest. He reached over and rolled down his window and asked where I was headed. I told him that my destination was where I lived, but then said that I would appreciate literally going anywhere in that direction. He then said that he could probably get me about halfway if I could spare a few dollars for gas. I told him I could do that and tossed my bag into the back under his tarp, then hopped into the passenger seat. As we began down the road, the conversation was cordial enough. He was making small talk about himself, what he did, and asking me what I was doing out in the cold. I told him that it was a family thing and that I wasn't welcome at home anymore. He sort of scoffed when I said that and then said something about how parents aren't supposed to abandon their kids. I noticed that as he was talking, though, he kept kind of glancing over at me, his eyes lingering a bit, and his hand kept hitting the seat near my leg. I was really hoping that I was just imagining it and that maybe he was just really relaxed with strangers, but I kept my guard up a bit more than normal. My instincts were starting to tell me that something was off. After a bit, he kind of circled back to the family question, asking me what the family dispute was about, because I had been a bit vague when he asked the first time. I mentioned that my dad was less than accepting of who I was, and he kept prying, asking what it was about me that my father had an issue with. I tried to dance around it a bit, but after being asked numerous different ways, I had to just tell him that it was because of my sexuality. My dad was unhappy with the fact that I was gay, and that, because of it, he had disowned me. I will say that when this happened, the world was a lot less accepting of people, which is why I was a bit evasive of the question. After I said this, the man nodded and basically reiterated that a parent should never abandon their child, which made me let that guard down just a little bit, thinking that he was on my side. Of course, the bells started ringing when the man took a turn onto an exit ramp off the highway and started down a bit more of a remote area. As he drove, I started to take in everything around me, noting various buildings and landmarks in case things went south. I won't say what he said to me next, but I will say that despite his comments about how it was wrong that my parents didn't accept me, he very clearly didn't accept me either, and he knew that my life was in his hands. Then he mentioned that he was sorry for what he had to do because I seemed like a nice enough kid, but he didn't have a choice. I tried to play dumb and ask him what he meant, and he just kind of laughed and started to reach for something in the center console of the truck. I knew exactly where this was going to go, and thankfully at this point, he had pretty much slowed down to a stop, so as he reached, I unlocked my door and I hit the ground running. As soon as I jumped out, I could hear him screaming at me, yelling about how I wasn't going to get far and that me running was just going to make it hurt more. I ran in the direction of where I knew the nearest building would be, and I did what I could do to hide in the trees off the side of the road to make sure he didn't find me. I have no idea how the hell I got away, but I did. Honestly, I'm not even sure if the man really looked for me, or if he just accepted that I had gotten away, and that he had successfully scared the hell out of me. The part that really sucked was that I had to leave my bag in the back of his truck, so I lost all my clothes. I had my wallet on my person, so at least he didn't get that. I took a few moments in the woods to catch my breath and wait it out, but then started off toward the gas station that I had noted earlier. Thankfully, nothing further really happened. I got to the station and I told the clerk what happened, and he offered to call the police for me. I took him up on his offer. The cops showed up and I tried to tell them what had happened, and of course, they didn't really seem to care. Because I was making a report on this though, they did offer to drive me to the station, and then from there, I could at least get a bus stop and wait for the next bus. If nothing else, the guy had driven me quite a bit closer, so it was much easier for me to get home from there. I never hitchhiked again after that, like I mentioned above, and I got a really good lesson on trusting people. Some people have this deep, ingrained hate that they will not let go of, no matter how friendly they are. Obviously, I got home okay after that, but I pretty much never went anywhere that wasn't available by a bus, and I got my own car afterwards so that I could just drive myself. To anyone out there that reads this, please do be careful and remember that not everyone, no matter how polite, will be a good person. Trust your gut, find alternate ways to travel, and do everything you can to avoid situations that don't feel right. I've been delivering food for one of those popular gig companies that you all know and love. The ones that will charge you way too much to have McDonald's McDelivered to your house. Since I've been doing it for quite a while, I've seen a lot of strange and creepy things, and I've dealt with what I would consider the most terrifying people out there. Some of my favorites are the ones where the person that you're delivering to comes to the door smelling like death or not wearing enough clothing. To add to that aside, please, when you order food from a pizza place through Uber or DoorDash or whatever, please, wear clothes. And please wear enough clothes to cover yourself. I can't tell you how many naked people I've seen through open curtains or when they open the door to get their no contact order. Anyways, moving past my complaints about people having no modesty, one of the other things we tend to run into are crazy people. Sometimes you get people that have pretty clear mental issues, and I understand that a lot of them cannot control their mannerisms, and maybe that's what was wrong with this lady, but honestly, this situation scared the absolute hell out of me. This happened last year during the C-19 situation, and as stated, I was a driver for one of the companies that delivered food to people from random restaurants. This was near the beginning when we were still able to hand you your food, but then we also had the option to do the no contact delivery. When we do the no contact, we were still expected to make sure that the customer got their food. Basically, we were supposed to drop the order on the porch, ring the bell, and step away to around 6 to 10 feet and wait a moment for the customer. I was very specific with how I did things. I wasn't one to just drop the food and run back to my car. This order was a decent-sized order from a bar and grill, which was fine. I drove to the restaurant, got the food, and then headed out toward the customer's house. I was heading down the street and approaching the destination when I noticed that the overall appearance of the neighborhood was starting to decrease. By this, I mean that the houses went from pretty normal suburban homes to a bit run down, all the way to some of the houses looking really bad. I would go as far as saying trashy. I was driving to the end of the road and was trying to find the house I needed to deliver to, and was honestly starting to get one of those pits in my stomach. The last couple houses went as such. One house looked kind of meh. One house was completely and totally trashed and looked like a drug house, and the last house looked decent. Looking at these three, I was honestly scared that the drug house was going to be where I had to deliver, so imagine my surprise when it wasn't, and the number matched the cleaner of the three houses. So I parked my car in front of the house and grabbed the food, making my way up to the porch. As expected, I drop the order on the porch and ring the bell, then stand back and wait for the customer. Within a few seconds of my ringing the bell, I hear the door next door, the door at the drug-looking house, fling open hard and smack against the siding. Obviously, this caught my attention, so I looked over to see what was going on, and I really wish I hadn't. Out of the door comes a woman that had a look about her that was nothing shy of horrifying. She looked like she was genuinely pissed off at the world, and like she wanted to hurt someone. And at that point in time, the only person nearby and the only person making eye contact was me. Out of nowhere, she yells, "What the hell are you doing? And what do you want?" I immediately looked back to the customer's door to wait for them to answer and tried to move on from that situation. I reach forward and ring the doorbell a second time and step back to my waiting position. Then, out of nowhere, I get this incredibly sharp pain in my leg. I didn't think much of it, but when I look down, I see a literal screwdriver handle sticking out of my leg, and this crazy woman standing there and staring at me like I was literally the cause of every problem she has ever had, and the only solution was to stab me with a rusty screwdriver from her junk pile. I honestly cannot overstate how awkward that this situation was. Yes, I had a screwdriver sticking out of my leg. Yes, I was starting to bleed some. Yes, she had seriously just stabbed me. But something about the moment of silence between us was just awkward. What exactly do you say to some crazy woman that stabbed you with a screwdriver while you were just delivering food to their neighbor? After a few seconds of silence, the customer opened the door and reached for their food, It almost grabbed it to go back in until he saw me, the neighbor, and the screwdriver. He dropped his food and ran out to the yard and basically stepped forward to get between me and his neighbor. I don't really remember much between that moment and when the whole thing came to an end. I know that the neighbor was screaming that she had just stopped me from robbing him, and then the customer was screaming about something. I just remember feeling woozy and asking for them to call an ambulance, and for some reason, randomly thinking about how I wasn't going to mark my delivery as finished. If anyone's curious, yes, the cops came, and yes, I ended up in the hospital, getting stabbed with a rusted and weathered screwdriver is something that they want you to get checked out for. I'm pretty sure she got arrested for this situation, but I don't really know because the officers never spoke to me about it. I did go back to delivering when I could. I just now have a bit of a limp and a nice circular scar where she stabbed me. I have a strange and creepy thing that happened to me a while back, and honestly, it's something that I genuinely cannot explain. I used to be a driver for a rideshare service that's pretty well known, and because of that, I was out on the road for a lot of the afternoon and evening. I would typically do the job until around 10 at night, and then head home from there and go to bed to wake up and get to my day job. It was a rough schedule to follow, and I was losing a lot of sleep because of it, but it is what it is. This whole thing took place in mid-April, and we were getting hit with some pretty intense spring storms. Where I live, we get the major rain and thunderstorms through April to the point of getting tornadoes, but money is money, and I was at a point where I needed to get paid. Plus, rainstorms meant that there was a chance of more clients because people wouldn't walk out in the rain. I was out taking the riders where they needed to go. I had finished out what I planned to be my last ride and was heading back toward the gas station when I saw a young man walking on the side of the road, soaking wet. Part of me said that he was fine, but the other part of me thought that I should ask him if he was okay at the very least, because I would want people to do that for me. I pulled over, careful not to splash him as I stopped, and rolled down the window asking if he needed a ride. At first, he seemed a bit standoffish and hesitant, but after a few moments, he nodded and thanked me, then walked around and got into the passenger seat. I asked where he needed to get to, and he asked me if I could take him to the Walmart that was in town. I lived over in that direction, so I was more than willing to do so. I mentioned that I could get him there, and mentioned that I did have to stop at the gas station though, because I was about to be on E. He said that was fine and that he could use something to drink anyways. We headed off, and the whole time we were driving, he just kind of stared at the road, not saying anything. I didn't want to push him into any small talk if he wasn't comfortable. I just mentioned that the storm was pretty crazy, and he nodded with a slight smile. The whole ride, this guy looked like he was really upset, like he wanted to cry, but was holding it back, which was why I really didn't want to push him into chatting. We pulled up to the gas station, and I parked at the pump, and he kind of stood around for a moment while I filled my tank. Once I was finished there, I asked if he was going to go inside to get his drink, and he mentioned that he didn't have his wallet, that he left it behind. I could tell that this kid was going through a tough time, so I told him I would buy his drink if he wanted it, and again, he seemed a bit standoffish. I said it was fine and that I'd be happy so long as he just paid it forward and helped someone in need in the future. He nodded and again thanked me. We walked into the gas station. The guy at the counter greeted us, and as soon as we got in, the guy said that he was going to use the restroom real quick. I said okay, and watched him walk toward the back where the restrooms were, and I went over and got my soda and waited near the counter. After a few minutes, The clerk kind of looked at me and asked if I needed any help with anything, and I said that I was just waiting for the guy that came in with me, and he gave me a very confused stare. I mentioned that the guy I came in with had gone to the restroom and that I was giving him a ride to the Walmart. He then said, "You didn't come in with anyone, sir." I described the guy in detail and mentioned that when we walked in, he went straight to the restroom. The clerk said that was impossible because the restrooms were locked after 9 p.m., and in order to use them, you had to get the key, and he still had the key. He then pulled the key from under the desk attached to a little keychain animal thing and said that in order to get into the restroom, he would have had to give us the key. I was a bit confused. I watched the kid go into the restroom, or at least I thought I did. I watched him go to the door and reach for it, and then went and got my soda, which is by the front counter. The restroom was in front of me the whole time until I was standing there by the counter waiting for the guy to come out, at which point I was near the hall where it was. I asked if I could go check on him in the restroom because I was certain he was in there, and the clerk said that was fine. He handed me the key and I went to the restroom, knocked, and when I got no answer, I unlocked it. It was completely empty, and it looked like it hadn't been used for a few hours. I looked back at the hallway and there was no exit there. It was just the one door to the restroom and the closet where all the soda syrup pumps were. There was literally nowhere to go in this area, but he was nowhere to be seen. At no point could he have exited the hall with the restroom without me seeing him. And there was no window, hole, exit, or method that he could have gotten out of this building. I walked up and just kind of stared at the clerk like, what the hell? He returned my very confused look and asked if I was okay. I kind of mumbled that I must have been losing my mind and just paid for my soda, thanking the clerk for his time and help. I walked out to my car and sat there in my driver's seat and just pondered what the hell this all was. There was no way for him to have gotten out of the station without me seeing him, outside of him somehow climbing through the ceiling, which, yeah, I don't think that happened. The clerk said he didn't see me walk in with anyone, which makes me think that this kid never existed. Yet he got in my car and I spoke to him and drove him to the gas station. I honestly have no idea what to make of this event, and it's one of those things that's seriously messed with me for this last year. I swear this kid existed. I swear he got in my car and walked into the station, but everything else seems to point at him having never existed. Was this some kind of spirit? Did I give a ride to a ghost or some kind of anomaly? I have no clue, and I honestly don't think I'm ever going to know. While I was going to school to become an RN, I took a job working the front desk at a local hospital. The job itself was pretty easy. I checked people in and out, took calls and directed them to different units, scheduled appointments, pretty simple stuff. To be honest, the hardest part was probably dealing with the printer. Even better, I typically worked the graveyard shift. My classes started around 9, so I would get off in time to sleep a few hours, go to school, eat and sleep some more, then right back to work. So there was even less work to do overnights, unless it was a Friday or Saturday. Those seemed to be the busiest nights. And no, I did not have much of a social life at the time. I had plenty of friends. I just chose to get straight into schooling and work as much as I physically could to save up money. That way I could have more money and possibly free time when I land my dream job. I guess I had goals, if anything. Anyways, so this happened one of those nights. The only person to have shown up had already been called back, so the waiting room was empty. The TV was on some kind of game show, and I was sitting at the desk working on homework. The whole front of the building was a plain wall, except for the small cutout that had glass sliding doors that led into another small square glassed area. Then there was another set of doors that then brought you into the building. So if someone comes in straight from the front, I could see them enter both sets of doors. However, if someone were to come in from the side lot or walk up from the side, I may not see them enter the first set of doors. That's what happened with this lady. I had my face down in my textbook when I heard the whooshing sound of the doors opening. I looked up and saw a lady approaching the counter. Because of where I work, I pay attention to how people look and try to understand the current state they may be in. And with her, I noticed right away something wasn't right. She was very thin and frail looking, but judging by her overall build, demeanor, and way of talking, she looked like she couldn't have been more than 40. She had on a huge jacket that she was nearly swimming in, which immediately alarmed me because we saw people dressed like that when they were trying to hide a wound, a weapon, and for women, sometimes a very pregnant belly. Her hair was stringy and oily and pulled into a bun, and her face was so sunken in with dark bags under her eyes. I asked how I could help and what she was there for, and she said she actually didn't need a doctor, but asked for my help specifically. She was talking a mile a minute, jumping around in her story, but what I got out of it was that her car broke down and asked if I could come look at it. She said she was trying to go see her mom, who lived a few hours away, who had been at home dying of cancer, but that's why she ended up here. At first, I really did feel bad for her. I knew my fair share of friends and family that had cancer, and I know how scary that could be, so she immediately got my sympathy. However, I was not and never have been a car person. Even though I'm a guy and I guess people expect me to know these things, I can get my own gas and check fluids, but that's about it. So I told her that I wasn't really a car guy, and she said it was okay and insisted I just come and see if I might notice anything. I again explained that I wouldn't be of any help, and also said that I couldn't leave the building since I was the only person working the front desk. She started to become more agitated and pushy on having me look, and as she pleaded, she started adding to her story and it wasn't making sense. She kept saying her kid was dying and needed to get home to her, but earlier she said it was her mom dying. I was catching all these discrepancies and it was starting to make me feel more suspicious of the whole situation. So I tried to slow her down as I walked with her towards the door, hoping this would also help, and asked her what exactly was happening to her car. She first wouldn't say more than it wouldn't start, so I tried clarifying to see if it died while she was driving, or if she was trying to start it, did she get any lights, and so on. But no matter how much I tried, she wouldn't give any more information other than, "I don't know, it won't start. Can you please just come look at it?" The more I questioned her, the more flustered and agitated she became, almost in tears that I wouldn't go out there. So I just stopped and asked her if she was okay, if maybe she was in some sort of trouble, which is when she finally let go of my arm and stepped back saying she was fine. I told her I would call a tow truck for her, as they could at least be more helpful than I was, and she just screamed at me to not call anyone. I stood there, waiting to see what she would do next, when she walked out angrily saying, "Just never mind, I'll figure it out." I just waited there to see where she would walk to, and noticed she walked to the side where I could no longer see her. I thought it was weird, but then went back to my desk. However, that whole interaction was still eating at me, so I decided to ask one of the med techs in the back if they could watch the desk while I stepped outside for a quick break, and they agreed. I wasn't lying about that part. I couldn't leave the desk unattended. They agreed, and once they came up, I walked outside and towards the side of the building, staying as close to the wall as I could. That's when I saw the woman in what I assumed to be her car, as well as some guy. They were seeming to be in a pretty heated argument by the way they were throwing their hands and he was punching the car. I wasn't close enough to really hear what was being said, but the only thing I could make out was, "You go." But even worse, after a few more minutes of back and forth, they both got in the car, him in the driver's seat, and they drove off without a single issue. I went back into the building, pretty spooked at this point, and told the guy watching the desk what had just happened. He agreed it was really suspicious, but since they left and didn't really do anything, said that ultimately there was nothing we could really do. I continued working that night, but that weird feeling kept lingering. What was her end goal? What was her plan after I got out there? The fact that there was a guy out there with her and that the car started just fine freaked me out, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I may have avoided a horrible situation. I'm curious if anyone else has heard similar stories like this. Could it have been an attempted robbery? Kidnapping? I have no clue, but I try not to think about what could have happened. Thankfully, I never saw them again, and I hope no one else ever fell for their sinister scheme. So that, my friends, was another grab bag of scary stories, where the subject this time around was literally just creepy people. The disappearing guy was kind of weird, but not really himself being creepy, but his actions or lack of actions being creepy. I don't know. People are just creepy. But if you enjoyed this video, please do give it a like below. And if you'd like to hear more content like this, consider subscribing. If you are already subscribed, then hi, welcome back. And lastly, don't forget to leave a comment on your thoughts or let me know what your favorite song is right now. And in the meantime, my friends, I hope you have a fantastic week. And until next time, take care.